Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, whenever you're watching this video for week one health psychology students. I hope that you had a chance to go over the introduction video that I had sent out to kind of go over kind of the expectations, going over what kind of those logistical matters, I guess you could say, that are important for the course. Every week I put out a video kind of going over the key points of the week's lesson, the content. And most students really do enjoy it. And I try to keep these minutes, or excuse me, I try to keep these videos to 30 minutes at most. The beauty of it is you could stop, look at it, write notes, start it again. A lot of students in the past have been known to read and listen, read and listen. All right. Um, all right, we're going to get right into it. I'm going to share a PowerPoint and some key pieces of this week. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to shut my video off just for the fact that a lot of times when I shut my video off, then that means one less thing I have to um, look at when I'm doing this. Okay, so I'm going to go from the beginning. Week one. So the topics in today's lesson is going to be uh, really when we talk about the role of psychology and what psychology is, right? And again, I'm not going to go word for word from your chapter. It's really important that you continue to read the chapter um, and take notes the best you can, right? Health psychology versus the biomedical model is going to be a key piece. And then those frameworks of health psychology. Here are your learning objectives. You will be able to examine the key concepts in health psychology with that historical aspect, the idea of what the study means behind that, when disease is becoming of a problem, right? And analyze those factors other than biological that can affect health and behavior. Again, that's where we start creating that basic foundation of health psychology. Here are your tasks. This is what's expected of you for this week. Please introduce yourself in the course form. This gives me a good chance for me to know a little bit more about you. Um, the cool thing is um, that I really enjoy doing, um, especially with this, actually this, well, and this too, more so this, um, is I get a chance to kind of get to know who you are, where you're from. I think the beauty of these courses where people are from around the world. Even when I do videos, I get to learn a little bit more about your culture as well. All right. Please read the learning guide. This gives you a little bit more information, and then it gives you what kind of assignments um, that you will be working with throughout the course. Please participate. You know the expectations of what participating, what that means, in the discussion. Post and then comment. That's really important that you're engaging in other people. And when you post, avoid good job or I like it. Um, you could say good job, but again, explain why they did such a good job. All right, kind of like a compliment sandwich. You start with something positive, maybe something critical, um, meaning maybe challenging something they said if you want, and then another positive comment as well. Please complete an entry in the learning journal and then take your um, self quiz. All right, we're going to go on to the next slide. So the biggest thing is that you're going to be looking at for, I hope this is not in the way, for this chapter is when we think about the continuum. When we think about health psychology, we think about this right in front of us and what this means. Continuum. When we think of a scale from one end to an extreme end to the other end. Now, people all could say, and this is one student once said, well, we're all going to go into this direction. No matter what, we're going into this direction every single day. Okay, as that's true. But there is a level of how you are living, how well you're living. When we think about health, what that means. But in psychology, it focuses on when you do become to a certain point, if you experience um, coronary heart disease, if you experience any type of illness, what are your beliefs in that? Now we think at COVID. COVID is going to be a relevant topic because when we think of COVID, we think of people's beliefs. Some people believe, and I take no stance on any of this. Uh, COVID is not real. COVID is only a cold. COVID is worse than the bird flu, right? But what does it do? And then when you get COVID, what levels of stress? How do you behave? What are your beliefs? Then it starts getting into the idea of vaccines, right? So in the idea of continuum, think of the directions that we go in and how well we're living life. And beyond that, with that, right? Yes, we all go in this direction eventually. But as you're living your life, how are you feeling? And as you develop relationships, you have connections, how does it affect kind of that daily life, right? That's really important to understand that. And the same thing is when we look at something like this, when we think about the health continuum, we think of the idea of health psychology, right? What does it mean? And health psychologists will look at normal health. What does that entail? How are you feeling? What's inside? Not only that biological idea, but what does that entail to how this looks for everybody? Factors to how this is portrayed, right? And what this means when you're living your best. A lot of science, a lot of research comes across with the types of foods you eat and how that affects your thinking, your cognition, right? Now, I work with young people, teenagers specifically, and I was having a conversation with a nurse, and there is a lot of um, gastric kind of issues in a lot of young people, especially adolescents. And why is that? Is because it's the habits that they're forming with food, right? And the connection with technology. How is it connected with technology? When you're drawn to technology, you're on the phone, you're on your Instagram, you're on your TikTok, you're being involved in such a way, then it connects to wanting to be relaxed, be comforted. And even if that's just in a negative way, what do we resort to? We resort to certain types of food. Now, it brings me to think that, well, then it's kind of in the feeling of this. And when we start feeling in such a way mentally, what is it doing physically to our body as well? So think about that. Really quick, your reading assignment for the week. Make sure that you understand what you're supposed to read, what chapters, what pages, and then to answer these types of questions. What are the four theories used in health psychology to describe health? How are they similar? How do they differ? And we'll go over that a little bit today. How do you see the dimensions of wellness reflected in your understanding of health? And what kind of upstream factors are affecting the health of your friends, your neighbors, and your community members? And when we think of health, we're going to kind of go along this idea. It's not just this physical health. We think of mental health. And then it goes into how does it affect other people? Your discussion assignment this week is this. Consider a time when you or a family member or a friend were sick. Could be a minor sickness like the flu or something more serious. Now, a lot of people in the discussions have used COVID and what that is. That's absolutely fine. You use what's important for you, what is important to you, what maybe has had a impact on you from to how to learn or what you learned from that. And then you're going to discuss the biopsychosocial factors in that. Then you discuss the various biopsychosocial factors that have contributed to the illness and make sure you include the behaviors involved. Oops. Describe what you learned from the textbook in your discussion and your discussion post with one well thought out question related to health psychology from which your colleagues can formulate a response or generate further discussion. Now, it's really important that you should have at least in your discussion at least 150 words, but no more than 300 because they kind of gets a little bit more, I don't want to say time consuming, but getting maybe mixed up with the point that you're trying to reach. The learning journal for this week is this. And after reading the dimensions of wellness model, rate your own wellness for each dimension on a scale from 1 to 10. And please note the 1 being the lowest and 10 being the highest. And then analyze that and why your highest rated dimensions and your lowest dimensions are for what that is, what the reasons, connecting that from what you have read to this point. Your learning journal, it's a little bit different this time around. It's at least 300 words, minimum of 300 words. And I really encourage you to make sure that you understand I want the minimum of 300 words. And I don't include the references, all right? Or, a lot of people like to copy and paste the question, like what we're trying to learn. This piece, I encourage you not to do that, all right? All right. Max of 400 or 500. If you go beyond the 500, I'm a little bit more lenient on going over 500. Now, if you get to 2,000 words, it's a little bit different, okay? All right, here we go. And if you use informational resources other than the dimensions of wellness model, be sure to identify the source and share the link. So let's overview the idea of psychology and what the biomedical model says before we get into the biomedical, or before we get into the psychology model, excuse me. The biomedical model answers the following question: what causes illness? Who is responsible for illness? How should the illness be treated? Who is responsible for treatment? And what is the role of psychology? Now, keep these questions in mind, and I'm going to tell you why I want you to keep these questions in mind, because it has a lot to do with the background of when we think about health psychology. We think about the person, right? We think about the ways of diet and exercise and sleep and what this has done to people through time, right? This has not been developed. And health psychology is a newer branch of psychology. Now, I'm not saying it was developed last year, but within the history of it, it is absolutely something that more and more doctors, and some doctors are we don't put into the biopsychosocial model. We look at the biological piece, right? We think about who's responsible for the illness in this case, what causes the illness, what's inside of the body happening for somebody to be like this. Now, with health psychology, with the biomedical model in mind, right? When we think about the biomedical model, let's go back to this really quick. When we think of that, there's an invasion, right? When we think of somebody getting sick, when we think in somebody has some sort of physical ailment, what was the change? What happened? What was the effect to that? Now, was it something with chemical imbalance? We can think of chemical, right? Let me just do this really quick. We can look at chemical. I'm going to put chemical as a C. We can look at maybe bacteria. We can look at viruses and maybe a genetic disposition. Okay. Hereditary genes, those types of things. That is what a lot of times doctors will do. They'll look at that, right? They'll look at those issues, right? Is it beyond the control of the patient, right? What kind of forces have caused that change to happen internally? How should the illness be treated? The doctor, this is where really the rubber meets the road with the doctor. How should the illness be treated? Well, who does it rely on? The doctor, the professionals. And what is the role of psychology in health and illness? We're going to look at the physiological and then the psychological. But a lot of times, what the biomedical model has used to and actually has created itself to look at was more of the physiological consequences, not the psychological consequences. How is the body going to change? Now, when we think of the role of psychology, let's take a look at this. We look at this right here, the sole responsibility for treatment rests on the shoulders of the medical professionals. That has been a key piece, right? It is the sole responsibility. Oops. I don't know why that did that, my friends. I apologize. Oh boy. All right. Using this model, the patient is viewed as a non-responsible participant, right? Or non-responsible participant in terms of making that choice, right? The intention. Okay. Now, through time, people and researchers and scientists and doctors have said, wait a minute, there is a connection. The mind is a part of the body. And what's happening is be is more connected to what's around us. We think of psychology. We think of what? We think of the mind, right? We think of the mind always. Think of the brain, basic general psychology, right? And this is something that has evolved into the new parts of psychology to understand more. Now, through time, the application of knowledge to improve health, right? Through knowing that smoking is harmful, eating certain foods is harmful. But then as time has gone on, you'll notice communities have come together more to do more, be more socially involved. Populations of people all across the world have noticed that there are certain lifestyles that are not good for our bodies, right? Many initiatives have happened. So then they're saying, wait a minute, the involvement of more pieces. So this is where we're going to talk about the four key theoretical frameworks: the biopsychosocial model, health as a continuum, the direct and indirect pathways between psychology and health, and a focus on variability. Let's take a look at this. So now those same questions with the biomedical model, we think of health psychology asks the same pieces. What causes the illness? And as we know, and if we go right here, pause the video if you need to. What causes the illness? Well, obviously, we know that there's not a single factor that says this is how it happens. Health psychology will move away from this simple linear idea that illness is created by a virus, that is created simply by cancer. Now we start believing, knowing that there are certain behaviors that have happened over time from people to say, wait a minute, if the smoking causes cancer, right? Let's dive more deeper into the reason people are smoking. Why are people smoking? Oh, they're stressed. They were raised in such a way that was habit forming, right? That was accepted in their community, in their family, right? And who's responsible for the illness? It is not simply, right, the individual. It's more about the individual, the behavior, right, of the individual, the actions of the individual. All right. So how does that person get cancer? Well, there's got to be a behavior factor in there. How should the illness be treated is the other question with the biopsychosocial model. Now, health psychology, right, is the idea that the whole person should be treated, right? The whole person. I want to make sure you understand that the whole person is to be treated. So then we think about it, it's not just attacking the disease, it's focused on the behavior. A family member of mine not only had Alzheimer's, and they treat the Alzheimer's with the care of the patient and understanding the medicine, but also giving them tasks, changing the way the routine is, changing the way they're looking at, wait a minute, how are we creating this environment for this person because we've noticed that their Alzheimer's is worsening. Wait a minute, who are they around? What situation are they in? Right? They're creating they're looking at the whole picture and the various strategies, and specifically coping strategies. The next question is, who is responsible for treatment? Now, since we are looking at the whole person, we look at the person. If people want to lower their cholesterol, right? We want to lower their cholesterol. What actions are they taking? What steps are they taking, right? What steps are they taking? And if they don't take those proper steps to control their cholesterol, then that treatment will not work for that patient. And lastly, what is the role of psychology in the health and illness? Well, it is not just the physiological, it is the psychological. It is looking at all of those pieces of the continuum. What is happening in their life to continue to make them sick, or what's happening to their life to allow them to get better. So when we look at the biopsychosocial model, we want to break it down as the bio piece that we talked about, the biomedical piece specifically before right here. So this is that biomedical model, right? The viruses, the bacteria, right? The psychological piece, biopsycho, right? um, Model right here, sorry for my writing on the screen, is the behaviors. When we look at psychology, we look at behaviors, we look at actions, we look at the systems of belief. What are their attitudes, their levels of coping, their stress? What is that stress? Is it good stress? Is it bad stress? Pain, there's all those factors. And then the social model, their class, their employment, race, and ethnicity. We're going to dive a little bit more deeper into those throughout the course. We don't get all those right now, but those are important to understand. Okay. Now, just a kind of a visual. Visuals are important as well, and I think that's important that we look at this, right. And when we look at the biological piece, it is often associated with the relationship of disease and the bodily health, right. Now, the psychological piece is the health condition, other illnesses, stress. What's causing what is the contributing factors? But this is specifically defined as the aspects of mental and emotional wellness that also relate to the behavior. Okay, when we look at that behavior, what is that person doing to prevent themselves from getting better? What are they doing in their life that has caused that stress? Stress has a huge factor in illness. We look at the the GI, right? We look at how in your digestive system, the amount of types of food that goes in there and how that can aggravate it. And then that aggravation can cause a person to be more agitated. Then with that agitation, that leads to higher levels of stress. So you can continue to see the cycle. And then when you start going into the social aspects of it, we look at the job, right? What kind of lifestyle are they living? What environment are they in to that point where it is causing them to be stressful? So again, is that stress causing an irritation, right? And then with that irritation in that GI tract and the digestive system, is that allowing the nutrients to be absorbed properly? So again, and that can create many other types of issues for that body. And again, it goes into that piece of imbalanced lifestyle. Or what is that imbalanced lifestyle? So you can see where health psychology has evolved throughout time to really look at and say, hey, there are a multitude of factors, and you'll hear me repeat that a lot, but I think it's really important for you to understand. And so in that piece right here, as a Venn diagram says, this physical and mental health, when we look at the current idea of what our lives are like and what the current state of mental health is all about, and as a counselor, I talk about this stuff all the time. What's motivating people? What is their lack of motivation happening? What is when we look at somebody like in the north, for example, and there's a lack of sun throughout the winter, right? And the seasonal effectiveness disorder. How is that? How is that applying to their life in terms of what are their choices, what are their actions, what are their behaviors? How does that create a belief system? But more importantly, the motivation piece. Are they in a good mental state or are they in a poor mental state? So again, I think you could understand this and look at this as kind of the foundation, and that is so very important. Okay, so the next theory, the key theoretical framework, is health as a continuum. So we think of the sequence of illness, the start of an illness. Where does our mind wander off to with that illness, right? Through the understanding of illness, the illness cognitions, as would say, right? What do we know when we have essentially the best piece to wellness is insight. When we have insight, we have better value to the point of respecting our bodies, respecting the ideas of the doctor. Now, again, everybody's different. It has a time to develop in that stage or in those stages. We can, through the health continuum or health and illness as a continuum, we can adapt to what is happening. We can understand that this pain is happening because of this factor. Through that, we can develop various coping mechanisms. I'm thinking of cancer. I'm thinking of other diseases, right? We can develop ways of perceiving the pain. What does this pain mean? Yes, but I can connect back to that knowledge that I have. Also, as a continuum with those support networks, and I'll talk about that later in the course, but those support networks are going to be huge for somebody dealing with those. And then at the outcome, what is the outcome? The choices that make us behave in such a way. Will we pass away sooner? Will we live a quality of life? Will we be at a stage where we're still fighting something, having some sort of ailment, but can we still enjoy life? As we know, people can have an illness and live a long life with that by making various choices, by acting, by following an attitude full of, well, just a positive attitude, I guess you could say. Probably the better way to use it. All right. There is the direct and indirect pathways between psychology, the third key theoretical framework. The direct pathway is the impact on your body. It is essentially look at it as the physical way of looking at your health status, where you are at right now. In the indirect pathway, right here, it is the ways in which a person works to create the thought. The book gives a great example where the psychological factors is someone's feeling stressed, right? And we can probably all relate to that. I am feeling stressed. I value my health and I am healthy. I like the idea when someone says, I value my health. So then what does that create? Well, it can have a direct impact in terms of if I feel valued in my health, I will make these choices. And this is where I'm at right now. Okay. Now, when we think of the indirect way, the ways in which a person works to create thought, okay, we can say, I am feeling stressed. I value my health. The same things. I am healthy. Well, what is that indirect pathway? That is the behavior. Think of this part right here as the behavior. Maybe they are feeling stressed. Well, they might drink. They might smoke. They might eat. Right? Depends on what we're eating. So if we feel value in my health, I feel good, I know what this does for me if I eat more fruits and veggies, then that is that indirect pathway that will create, again, that health status. It is all up to that impact. So think of the medical ways of your body. Think of the dentist. If you have, for example, and it could be this psychological way of I'm feeling stressed or I value my, think of value my health. I value my health. Well, oral health is important too as well. What is the direct? Well, it's the way that your gums are their teeth are, right, and how that has an effect on your body, right? So if that indirect pathway would be going to essentially doing what? Yes, it would be brushing your teeth. It'd be doing the right thing, eating certain foods that would not harm your teeth. Okay, I think you get that. I think that's important. I always like to make sure that I reiterate that point, especially in the first week as well. And this is exactly what you could look at, right? Think about this in your body, right? You know that when we think about the indirect, or excuse me, I'm gonna actually that's exactly what the book says. But when we think of that direct uh, way of looking at your body, it's the way that you maybe feel stressed. What happens? Well, your respiration, maybe you're anxious, maybe you're nervous. What is that? What is your body reacting by doing? Right? Have you ever been in a situation where you're nervous or you're upset, you're angry? What does your body feel? Temperature, right? This is interesting. There is an acid-base water balance. I don't know a lot about that, but at the same time, I think that's interesting. So there's a lot of different pieces that we can look at that direct way. The book also has this. This is exactly from the book, and so uh, I, I would hope that you could understand that now. And if you have further questions, you can ask me anytime. And a focus on variability. So when we think about this one, the biomedicine area of psychology, well, just maybe just the biomedicine area, tends to focus on knowledge as a predictor of behavior, as the book says. And so I look at it as knowledge creates a path of understanding or the insurance of consequences. Now, again, when we think of consequences, a consequence is not always bad. A consequence can be a good consequence, right? So someone says, I know smoking kills. Okay, there's the knowledge. I know that stress or distress is bad for my body over time. Okay, and disease is a predictor of health outcome. Okay, the outcome, someone says, I have a disease, I have cancer, therefore I will pass away sooner. Now, on the other way to look at that, health psychology comes in and says, wait a minute, we can have a little variability with this and understand that in this thinking, right, we could say that yes, stress is bad for our bodies, and yes, stress is not healthy for our heart, especially the distress. But there are changes. What are the factors behind that distress? Why are you feeling such a way? Why is your blood pressure constantly going up? But let's look at the factors, right, in that situation. On the other one, when I talked about cancer, two people might find some sort of like a lump, for example, in their body that could say, hey, this is serious. One goes to the doctor, one does not. There it is. So the scale, the variability tends to show a fixed pattern, right? Of person A does not go to the doctor, does not build a sense of knowledge behind that, even insight to build those choices. And one does. So exactly what they do, it's a pattern. It's a pattern. And so health psychology also looks at like to look at that person and says, well, they're not going to the doctor. Why are they not going to the doctor? There's a reason why, right? So really there's always the variability piece of the four. This is the fourth key theoretical framework. It says that illness cannot be explained by a severity or knowledge, not all of it, but there are a multitude of factors working to create that person's understanding or reality, behavior. There are cognitions. Your book talks about emotions. This is where the rubber meets the road with psychology, my friends. This is exactly. It's not always physiological, but it is more. It is, I want to say more, but a lot of it's psychological too as well. The cognitions, the emotions, our expectations. We can look at our cultural backgrounds. We can look at our family backgrounds. We can look at the environments in which we are living. What are we learning? What are we not learning? The peer pressure, social norms, coping. What does coping mean? How are we coping? There is healthy ways of coping, and there are unhealthy ways. The social support or lack of. So this is exactly right where that variability piece comes in. So I think it's important for you to understand that health psychology is you'll learn if you've never taken I'm assuming you've all taken some sort of psychology course, but maybe you haven't. I can't assume that. It's not very good thinking of me. There's a lot of little pieces that I will bring into just general psychology. I mean, we only have 8 weeks, essentially 9 weeks, to dive into this, and it's there's a lot of information. Um, but the book gives you a really good dive deep enough, right, into this topic. So I'd encourage you to watch these videos every week. They're not required, but I know that students in the past in all my classes have enjoyed them. I know that these are important for you to connect, and it's important for me for you to. Well, it's important for me to kind of connect a little bit, right? So if we were in class, I would do a lecture going through this material and such. So if you have any questions, let me know, and we'll go from there. All right. Thanks for watching.